red one with the ink blot on it. It doesn't ever lie straight until Jeanette would be gracious enough to me to iron it. So it doesn't ever lie straight, but it has that ink blot on it. And I always wear it, especially when I'm in the presence of great people. And today I'm making a special obeisance to a prophet. The prophet is Dr. Curtis Caine, a crusty old constitutional nonconformist crank, just like me. And I hope maybe just like you, my listener, we all need to be a little bit more nonconformist and all a little bit crankier than we already are. Only let our crankiness not be about personal whims and personal desires and tastes and flavors, but rather let our crankiness be for, I would say, first of all, justice itself as God defines it. And then the secondly would be law itself, man's laws in the case of the Constitution, and also state law. Before coming to the studio, I dropped into a law office here in East Ridge. I passed it every day, and I said, I've been meaning to go by there. It's an office. It's called Olivencia and Cribben Law Office with a strong Hispanic flavor. And so I was met with a gracious interview by Hector Olivencia. Now, what I was there for was to give him a letter, an inquiry letter, about whether or not he could handle a traffic case. And you think, well, what's the big deal handling a traffic case? Well, traffic is not understood by attorneys. Attorneys have given us the fix that we're in now. And the worst attorneys, of course, are ones in the highest positions. They're called Supreme Court justices and also appellate court justices. They maintain our insurance-based legal system of positive law. And so attorneys who are their betters, the ones who are poor and work in our law offices in Hamilton County, they certainly don't know the issues about liberty and freedom. So I have a query letter that has about 10 questions because I'm trying to help a woman, and Chris Helton, the municipal judge in East Ridge, is forbidding me from assisting or representing or speaking for a McDonald's staff boss named Christina Wright. She's at the McDonald's on Brainerd Road, by the way. Very fine woman with two daughters. And so to help her, I got to find an attorney, right? Because you can't have the counsel of your choice in Tennessee, according to Chris Helton. So what I'm doing is looking for attorneys. I've got to send some of these letters out, but I met this attorney here in East Ridge in person. I said, I'd like to ask you these questions. Could I just give you this letter, and could you get back to me? His name is Hector Olivencia, largely Hispanic clientele. And I said, well, there are several questions here, but there's one main question, and it's this: does the exhibit on demand statute apply to your people who are the freest of all here in the country, since many of them travel on the public roads without permission? They don't have licenses. And so the question I had for him was, does that statute apply to the young men and young women and many others who are Hispanic, some even speak English, who are on the road freely? The exhibit on demand statute, and he looked it up on his smartphone and read it. This was all kind of new to him, and he said, well, we discussed it, and I said, well, notice the language. It says every licensee shall produce such licensee's license when demanded by an officer to be exhibited, right? It's called exhibit on demand. That's more or less the language of that statute. So I said, does that statute apply to someone who's not a licensee, who's never had a license, like many of your people who have come here to be free, right? They've come here to be free from harassing police gangs and criminal gangs and extortion gangs in their countries. They're here for freedom. Are they really free, or are they being harassed for exercising a right? So it is. If you can find this letter, you can help me in this matter, please, my listener. I'm looking for an attorney who can handle a traffic case, and the letter asks the questions that the attorney has to be able to answer correctly before I can recommend him to Mrs. Wright. And how this case will be paid for, I don't know. But I've got to find an attorney who knows something about the traffic law and has some passing familiarity with the basic ideas of liberty, which is to say this, for example, if it's a constitutional right, a God-given, constitutionally guaranteed, I should say, unalienable and inherent right, well, then it cannot be taxed, permitted, licensed, or in any way oppressed or made subject to state action, right? If it's a constitutionally guaranteed right, it cannot be made subject to any of the police powers of the state, which are exercisable upon commerce, and only where there is a threat to the health, safety, and welfare of the people. Right? That's when police powers are allowed to affect and touch and injure the private sector. So that's my question. And if you know an attorney who could be of use to Mrs. Wright, you, my listener, please contact me through Nuganomics.com. The post is on Nuganomics.com. That is perhaps the most important website in Chattanooga. Put there by the blogger with the biggest pen. That's me, David Toulis, with the bow tie, the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga. And so the first query has gone out in hard copy to Hector Olivencia, and we will see if Hector Olivencia can deal with this question. Probably I'll send a copy to Jerry Summers and Lesser Lights in Chattanooga. We have on the phone the prophet Curtis Caine. He's a prophet because in 1966 he sent a letter to more than 1,200 doctors in Mississippi. And I'm sorry?
1,900.
1,900. Thank you. There's Dr. Caine chirping in to give me a correct number. Now, the question we want to ask you, Dr. Caine, is how is it that you operated a practice outside the view, outside the generosity of the federal government's Medicare program? How is it you could possibly put bread on your table and raise a family when you are a nonconformist, free operating doctor in Mississippi? Tell my listener about life as a doctor outside the machinery.
Well, it is, as you mentioned, it is a lonely position to be in. And as I've mentioned earlier, it all boils down to what each physician, as each citizen, is going to exert his own self-interest and his own morality, his own soul, or is he going to knuckle under orders from someone else who wishes to exploit him? Now, yes, in the years that I practiced, I made about a third or a fourth of what my colleagues did. And because they participated and they grouped up and got exclusive contracts with third parties, and therefore they didn't have to appeal by their competence and by their standing for clients known as patients. They had a ready served up clientele because they were members of groups that had contracts with third parties. Well, Lynn and I, we were together for...
Now, who's Lynn?
That's Lynn. That's my wife, my sweetheart. We were together for 70 years, and she was the ruler of me, and that was all right. But for some other third party to be ruler of me involuntarily is not all right. But she was able, because of her knowledge and cunning, to fix it that though we had an income less than our colleagues, she was able to husband those funds so that we ended up at the end of our active participation in medicine with a nest egg that fixes it so that we can be independent. And so could other folks. Instead of having multitudes of money to retire on, we had a comfortable nest egg. But I did not, and she did not, in the doing, compromise our morality and our principles.
There is a coming disaster in the country, Dr. Caine. An insolvency is upon us. We are an insolvent government. and the American people are largely debt choked and insolvent. The idea of inevitability, I say that because I want to ask you about the idea of inevitability. At the time, 1966, when you sent your letter out to 1,900 physicians urging them to not participate in the allure of Medicare, there was a lot of sense of these kinds of things. Socialized medicine is inevitable. We cannot avoid it. This is the way. This is the direction of humankind. We are evolving and continually improving, and therefore collectivism is the acme of humankind, of human civilization. There was this sense that you just can't go against the tide like that. But now, I think that if you read the best writers, as I try to, Dr. Caine, there's a sense that this is turned something else now. It seems to be increasing in inevitability, and that would be insolvency and the prospect of my listener finding advantage and freedom, perhaps, and maybe new prosperity as the system collapses. Now, in your letter, you talk about collapsing of systems in socialism. Say something about this sense of inevitability. I have the sense that collapse is inevitable, and we had better be prepared for it. And it's not just in your investments. It's a spiritual matter. It's a social matter. It's also how you make your family arrangements matter, Dr. Caine. How would you discuss this question of the inevitability of socialism and collectivism and the reversal thereof?
Well, Gibbons, in his history of the civilizations of the world, said that there had been 200 civilizations, more or less, in history, and that the average life was 200 years. Now, of course, there are exceptions. The rule of Rome was 1,000 years, etc. But each of the civilizations that ended up on the dump heap took the same course. Socialism is not self-supporting. Socialism is robbery, and it is immoral to take the money from one person and give it to someone else and indenture civilizations unborn. We're told that the national debt is $21 trillion. No, that is on budget. That's budget debt. But the actual commitments of the federal government are in excess of 122 trillion. And they don't show because they are promises for Social Security recipients, Medicare recipients, food stamps, etc., all of which are forbidden by the Constitution. So that I characterize it this way. If we had a real good castor oil dose of Constitution tonight, by tomorrow morning, most of our troubles would have been purged, and we would be a free constitutional republic again.
Well, Dr. Caine, there's a writer named Sir John Glubb, and he has a famous essay. It's 25 pages, and my listener, I want to just make a reference to that. It's called "The Fate of Empires," and it's by Pasha Glubb, as he was known, Sir John Glubb, "Fate of Empires" and "Search for Survival." He puts the duration of an empire, such as we are one now, at 250 years, and here our recent 4th of July put us at year 248 or 249, something like that. It's very close to the universal retirement of empire-dom, Dr. Caine. So I think very bad things are ahead for the machinery of centralization, and ahead we have many opportunities in decentralization and a market economy.
Well, just remember that frequently we are told by our Sunday school teacher that certain things transpired in Scripture when they are really not in Scripture. They are the They are the result of the writer of the Sunday school lesson to interject matters that are not actually in Scripture. Now, as far as law is concerned, that is the difference between constitutional law or case law. Most court cases are settled on precedent, the precedent of previous decisions that overrule and outweigh the actual language of the Constitution, so that we are told that, well, this is modern times, Curtis, and the Constitution is a living document. It has to adjust with the times. No, sir. Scripture is not living. It is set in stone. And the Constitution does not evolve and have to take on other meanings because our economy and our understanding of science and the like fix it so that it has to progress. No, principle never changes. And the fact that so many people have been schooled by those who are disobeying the law to have the understanding that, yes, we have to be modern, we have to change things. That is correct as far as technology is concerned, but it's not correct regarding principle. Lies are lies regardless of whether they are recognized as such. And ill and sin are the same whether they are recognized as such.
Well, let me ask you this. We're making mention here, Curtis Caine, the secular prophet warning against entry into Medicare among your profession co-members back in 1966. Hell and judgment face the individual, but also societies and governments also face a judgment. And I would say God ordains these judgments on governments and kings and mega systems as well. How should my listener be confident as these systems collapse? Because I believe they will collapse. Are these things to be dreaded, or should my listener look forward to them as grounds for opportunity and new directions?
Well, the bad guys are not going to reform themselves. They get all the perks. They sit at the front table and they make a speech and everybody claps and they drive in a limousine, and they're not going to give up the perks that go along with what they are. So they're not going to reform themselves. They're going to have to be made to reform, and we have the provision of that. We're told that we need a constitutional amendment for the limitation of terms. No, we don't. We've already got it. You elect the House every 2 years, you elect the president every 4 years, and you elect the senator every 6. Just don't send them back to Congress. And so we don't need an amendment to the Constitution to do something, because the Constitution is violated right and left every day. So what would it is obvious that making it part of the Constitution as an amendment, it'd be violated too. Health, education, welfare, power, banking, etc. are all forbidden to the federal government, and yet the federal government is in those activities.
This is David Toulis, and we're talking with Curtis Caine. Dr. Caine, I want to thank you so much for joining us here. It's been a real delight to chat with you and have your insight. Thank you, sir.
May I have one more word?
Yes, go ahead.
One of the originators of this republic made the statement that every now and then the soil of freedom needs to be fertilized with blood. That's what happened throughout history when freedom was usurped by tyrants. Blood had to be spilled to regain freedom.
This is David Toulis, and we're here in Curtis Caine, a retired doctor living at Morning Point here in Chattanooga, a nonconformist, independent doctor who prophesied correctly and justly about the slavery of the medical profession to the state, and also people like you bow down under Medicare and all the other free things in Washington. David Toulis.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
Chattanooga police say Willie J. Colakua was shot on Talley Road and he doesn't know who did it. This happened yesterday on the 700 block of Talley Road. If you know anything, you can give an anonymous tip to the police. Early voting is approaching fast, but is your vote safe from cyber attacks? Hamilton County election commissioners are taking those extra steps to make sure you're protected. The new Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center allows them to go in and patch those